our guests. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Lawrence, and I'm a co-founder of Likikiri Collective, as well as a professor at the University of Juba.
You're most welcome. Again, Rebecca. Yes.
Thank you.
السلام عليكم South Sudan. أنا اسمي كازيتو بارومي وبج. أنا واحد من الجماعة بتاع ليكيكيري. يعني إحنا اللي اشتغلنا في الكتاب.
هنتكلم عنه بعد شوية.
أوكي ما في كلام.
Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Richard Bastin, a teacher and one of the Likikiri Collective member, Gisa Lap.
Okay. Teacher Richard or Mr. Richard, Kizito and Dr. Rebecca, you are most welcome on the show. Today we are discussing a book, a restorying book, which is possibly a new concept that we are getting introduced to in South Sudan. The book is called The Father Who Ate His Children. Very controversial, huh? Okay, so tell us a bit about the father who ate his children, and then what do we mean by restoring?
Okay, thank you, Eva. Restoring South Sudan, it came out of a project. Actually, the sort of working title of the project was Understanding Master Narratives, Creating Counter Narratives about Gender Norms and GBV. And then through the process of doing this project, we came up with the restoring concept. But they sort of say the same thing in some ways. So it aims to promote intergenerational dialogue. A lot of the project is about creating dialogue between young students and young people in general, youth, and elders, through participatory research. So actually we see that the people involved in this project did research. They collected stories, they recorded stories. This is part of research. And they also did documentation, and they also did cultural production. So out of the stories, they created radio drama, and they also worked on this book. This Restoring South Sudan, we see it as a larger project, and this first edition focused on a story-based approach to gender norms and GBV. And then out of that, like I said, they did cultural production, which one of those was the book. And since today's program is focusing on the book is a repository of some of the stories that these students collected, including Kazito and including Richard was part of the process. And so they collected over 50 stories, and then there was a selection process that came down to 8, actually. And those stories were stories that parents had told. We did field trips to chiefs' courts, where chiefs and their communities told stories about gender relations and gender norms. These were recorded. We had story sessions where we analyzed the stories using a framework. And then eventually, the students also retold the stories, which is the restorying concept. And the restorying concept, we have two different ways that we understand restorying. Restorying, first, is the sort of play on words with the idea of restore.
Right.
To restore something. So we're restoring stories that may have been forgotten or aren't told anymore for lots of reasons. People don't have time to tell stories, or they just, it's not a priority. Some stories have gotten kind of buried. So this is the restorying. The first way that we understand it is that the students visited with communities and restored these stories to visibility in their own learning. So we see it as like part of their education, that they visit with communities and they learn through stories rather than just in the classroom. And then the second way that we understand restorying is the idea of to restory the story.
Right.
Which is the critical pedagogy part of it, which is like, okay, let's think critically about this story, rather than maybe just repeating it as told, but let's look at it and see, does it speak to you as a student today, and what elements in it do you think you could change?
Okay. Before I go on to Kizito, who is a big part of collecting these stories originally, just to ask, when you were collecting stories, did it just happen to be that a lot of them had to do with gender, or was it intentional that you went to collect stories that had to do with gender?
That's a really good question, because actually Likikiri was involved in an earlier folktale project called Naish Mabad, Living Together, which was about folktales focused on peace building and mechanisms for peace building, and that was in 2016. It's like
15, 16.
16. Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you. So that happened in several sites around South Sudan, actually, and those stories were collected. We actually have a book of that called South Sudan Folktales, and that became also a radio program. But what I was going to say is that actually in those stories you already see gender as a really salient issue, because gender is part of everyday life. I mean, you can't avoid looking at gender in any topic that you look at. You know, it's
Right.
sort of relevant to anything. So they're already there. So, but in this project, we did intentionally focus on gender. And when we met with chiefs in particular, but when we met with communities, when we were telling the students how to approach family members, it was a subject of conversation, and I'd be interested for you to talk to Kazito and Richard about it. But because the issue of translation, you know, what language are you going to use when you say, "Oh, I want a story about gender," you know? And we talked about this a lot because we didn't really want to address it head on, like GBV, because
Right.
we felt that would, I don't know, it would dictate the kinds of stories we were getting, and it would limit people's minds when they're talking to us. And we
Absolutely.
wanted them to tell us, feel free to tell us about the past and the way things were without thinking of judging it as a GBV issue. So we talked quite a bit about how to approach it, and we often just said, tell us stories about how men and women related in the past, gender relations, I guess you could say. But we did focus on gender though in this project.
Okay, sounds great. So Kizito, I know you were you yourself and quite a few other students, plus your teacher, were collecting stories. So what was that process like for you?
والله شكرا لك احنا زمان بدأنا البرنامج يعني اصلا كان صار في البدايه احنا بنخاف هنا يعني لانه بيشيلونا للناس الكبار يعني بنقعد مع مشينا رحلات كثيره شديد يعني جبل دينكا تاني وين منقلا يعني مشينا محلات كثير يلا زي بنقعد مع ناس الكبار ده احيانا نحن بنخاف لكن شنو قاعد نستفيد منها في النهايه في القصص القديمه اللي قصوا لنا يعني كان رحله يعني مفيد للحياه ذاته يعني ساعدنا شديد ذاته يعني تعلمنا منه.
القصص اللي لميتوها دي لقيتوها قصص حقيقية ولا؟
والله فينا نقول قصص حقيقيه حقيقيه لو في بعض منهم ذاته يعني هسي في الحياه بتاعنا الحالي بقى ما في منه ذاته من القصص اللي كان قالوا لنا ديلت يعني القصص ده بقى ما في هسي كده يعني الناس بقى ماشيين في حياه ثانيه الناس بقى يعني حاجات القديمه اللي كان قالوا لنا هناك ده
بقى ما في
انا شايفه بقى ما في ثاني.
يلا في القصص المكتوبة، القصص الأوريجينال ذاته اللي مشيتوا لميتوها من الناس الكبار زي ما انت بتقول. اوكي، القصص ديل بتلقى انه زي قصص توهم، فيه كثير من حيوانات، زي بيحكوا لك قصة لكن ما قاعدين يحكوا لك عديل، قاعدين يحكوا لك من بورا.
ايوه
صح. يلا الفهم جاينا وين؟ ما سألتوا أسئلة وليه القصص ما بتتقال بطريقة عديل أو طريقة دغري؟
سألنا أنا مذكر كان سألنا هم قالوا لنا شنو أصلا يعني قصص زي ده أحيانا بيكون يتكلموا يعني عن شنو عن زول لكن ما ممكن شنو يقولوا له وشو كده طوالي قال له زول له وده زول له فلان عشان كده بيجيب لهم بطريقة حيوانات
عشان يشوفوا هم قاعدين يعملوا شنو لكن من دون ما تتهم زول تقول له انت عملت كده،
من دون ما تشخص زي كمان. ده الحاجه اللي كان قال لنا سألنا في النقطه ده.
Okay. And Mr. Richard, how was the process like for you? Obviously, you've collected, I think, over 50 stories? Over 50 stories, and then now your students are restoring and retelling those stories from now their perception, or let's say their experience. What was that process like for you?
The process, it began by taking consent from the parents. So we went from house to house. Those students who we nominated them, we chose them to collect those stories for us. They were around 12 students. So We went house to house, take consent from their parents. This is the first thing. Secondly, because it will take long time, okay, maybe 1 year. So we have to take them to various places. We started collecting the stories by their parents themselves.
From the parents.
From the parents.
Okay.
Okay. Example, في حجة مشينا واحد من أمهات بتاع الأولاد دل. طبعا في بروسيس هناك إننا راديو ريكوردر بندي كل طالب راديو يقعد معه مثلا 4 يوم. امشي بنسأل سؤال بسيط، امشي اسأله قول لي احكي لك قصة زمان، قصة اللي بيعلم ايال يا حاجات اولاد بيعملوا شنو والبنات بيعملوا شنو. This is what we call gender norms in the past. يلا جابوا لنا قصص بالطرق برا وبجد يعني هنا كأساتذة كمعلمة المدرسة حتى ناس الليكيكري استفدنا من القصص ديل. وفي قصص تانيين في زول قال حكى قصة بتاعه قصة جميل موجودة في الكتاب والزول ده بعد شهر منه يتوفى. يعني الأم ده حكى قصة بتاعه في كتاب هنا وبعد شهر مات. كان عيان يعني خلى حاجة وراه حاجة بيذكروه به يعني حتى الولد ده بقى مبسوط يشوف كتاب حاجة أمه قصة في راديو قلنا حولناه وكتبناه ودينا يعني فصلناه ده وتاني عملنا restoring again. So هو مبسوط يشوف كتاب ده يكون مبسوط. So دي حاجات اللي عملناه ومع الأطفال.
Okay, Kizito, you made a very good point. I know we are still growing, and I want to bring you to this kind of contemporary moment. We are attached to things like Facebook, we love watching movies, and from your personal perspective as a growing person, okay, with a lot of vision, how does it contradict you, like telling stories? You know, sometimes we youth take it as, oh, it's Ashen, I don't want to go back there. Is that happening? So how is the story benefiting you, like telling stories? You have been moving a lot, and at your age, how is it like? Do you see anything important in it, like a student?
لا سؤال حقك سمع نتكلم عنه. يعني أنا شخصيا كده يعني قصص اللي أنا استفدت منها من ده يعني أحيانا أنا بقول غير في ناس كتير يعني وداني ذاته أفكار السمح اللي قدام يعني.
أنت عندك كم قصة في الكتاب؟
أنا
هاي في الكتاب ذاته لميت فيه كم قصة أو كم قصة كتبته؟
والله فينا نقول نص يعني ما متذكر بالتحديد لأنه كلامنا كان من 2019 تقريبا.
ما بتتذكر من زمان. اوكي
ممكن نقول نص لأنه كل مرة أنا قاعد ما أنا موجود ما بنلم ما بنمشي نشتغل ما تاني بعد ما نمشي نلم القصص في الراديو حقنا تاني بنمشي نكتبهم تاني هنا ذاته. تاني هنا قاعد نكتب القصص ديل يعني اشتغلنا فوق كتير.
Okay, it's very important. I see you when you're coming, you're having the book, like from the book itself.
Yeah.
Which story do you like most and why?
Okay, كان في قصة شديدة عجبني كان بتاع جوج وما جوج ده قصة البنت اللي جاي طالب عن حق بتاعه أول مرة طالب عن حق بتاعه ده كان قصة الزمن ده يعني عجبني شديد كان يعني تصرف البنت ده ذاته عجبني شديد يعني أقنع الناس كله بأنه بنت ممكن أصلا يلقى شنو حق بتاعه حتى غير شخصية بتاعه لبس حاجات أولاد عشان أقدر أمشي أحارب حق بتاعه لأنه كان قالوا زمان قال بيت ما ممكن شنو قال بيت ما ممكن يمشي يجي في محكمة ويطالب عن حق بتاعه قال الحقوق دي للأولاد بس فقط. سو الشخصية بتاعه اللي هم السلبية وقلبوا للولد ده الشخصية ده قوي شديد الشخصية ده عجبني شديد يعني إحنا أصلا ما ممكن إننا ما نقول بأنه ما ندي البنات حقوق بتاعهم يعني أصلا أي إنسان عنده حق بتاعه بالذات بيت ده اللي سنو بتاعنا أصلا يعني إحنا ذات البرنامج حقنا إحنا شغالين فوقه عشان إنه شنو نوري الناس بأنه ما ممكن يعني كل الناس يكونوا سوا يعني ما ممكن نتقاسم بفرق يعني نفرق قال بيت ما ممكن يدوك عشان بمشي بيتراجلوا بيجي بخلي حاجات لا ده حق بتاعه ده الحاجة الفكرة اللي كان فيه في ناس كتير ليه يوم الليلة يشغلوا كده حيكون فيه.
Wow. Mr. Richard, you have brilliant students. I know you are praised. Okay, that's very nice. I'm saying now Kizito is looking at life from a different dimension. Like even in a family, I think sometimes you can help your sisters and do some other things because you're really encouraging it. But then, like a teacher, Mr. Richard, what roles have you taken, like, in this kind of, you know, telling stories with your students, and what role exactly have you taken, like, to guide the student? And you think it's very beneficial for them as a teacher because this is part of the nurturing and growing students to make them better person. So, like, exactly in the story, in the process of writing the stories, what role have you been playing? And like, you see it's really benefiting the students in this project.
In this project, what I see very crucial, the step of writing these stories. Because actually to write a story, there is steps. Number one, we call it setting. A student should learn how, in a setting, it divides, tells you the time and the place where that events happened. So in the second, you should have characters in the story. Who played that game, who does Mr. X and Y. Number three, in that we have the plot on the writing the story. The last thing is the theme, where the message of the what? The message. Any story has a message, even though, because we know how, even though usually you watch movies, either it is a tragedy, a love story, or maybe this type. So you will find them all at the end of any story has a message, even though it's good or bad, it has a message. So this way, for me as a teacher, I usually help the student how to imagine, to create their own story, write them down. It begins from the day you wake up in the morning. You see how you write a simple diary. You see, this is as a teacher. So writing a lot helps a student.
And let me say, can I interject here that Richard played a really crucial role in the whole project. I mean, he was there from the very beginning, selecting the students with us. He helped them with the consent process with the parents. He went to the field trips. And actually, Richard also performed in a project song that the students composed along with the project director Atem El Fatah Atem and the project manager Nianachek Abel, who couldn't be with us today, but was very, very crucial in the project. So anyway, the teacher played a really, really crucial role and was part of like actively producing cultural production.
So just in addition, so maybe I hope and I wish you should listen to these stories, drama stories. That's
the radio drama.
Radio drama.
He also acted in the radio drama. So did Kizito.
Because the book it is in English.
Yes.
So I translate them all in Arabic, simple Arabic. Juba
for the drama.
For the drama, radio drama. I have to change them from English to simple Arabic.
All of the stories.
All the stories.
Okay. Before we get into the drama part, I'm really interested in knowing if, after the book was produced, did the parents of the students get to read the book? Because in the ReStorying, so many of the stories that now the students have told, it probably has a lot to do with their real life situation or experiences. And I read about bullying. I read of students feeling lonely, or so all of this came in. So did parents get a chance to read this book, and what was the result of that? Or after you yourself also read the stories, how did that improve you as a teacher? Because now you have students and they're communicating with you through their writing. And now you have a responsibility to maybe do something about it. So how has that helped you as well?
Really, it helped me a lot. Number one, telling stories, or if you want to teach any subject you want to teach, if you're just a teacher, you take just a piece of chalk or a marker pen, you start teaching, that lesson of yours will become very boring, very boring. Sometimes you have to quit a lesson. You bring something that unfamiliar to them, put them with the stories. You see, believe me, what I'm telling you from my life story. Until now, if you go and ask any, I'm not telling it because I'm very proud of myself, but you go and ask my students whom I taught, you say, do you know Teacher Bastin? They will say, I know him very well. Nobody get bored in my lesson. Nobody. It begins from those who are in nursery school, because I love to tell them stories, because I know a lot. Somebody told me a lot of stories. I know, maybe I can say 700 stories about these small stories.
Yeah.
Even I create my own. You see? So I say I have found it very beneficial. So to make interaction with the students when you are teaching, so they will not just sleep inside your class. That is important of the stories. This is what I learned from it. And also an addition from Kazito. The first time we introduced the gender-based violence, or just gender norms, because I can remember so far very well that day, because he said because when we introduced that lesson, we said that it is normal. We said it is normal, a boy and a girl do the domestic work together. Example, washing utensils, afashat bekasolo. For him,
you said GBV class or
no lesson, just before we started the project.
Like
Introduction. The first day, we after selecting, we sit down together. So we talk about them. We are going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we ask just the question of gender norms. What do you understand by the word gender? We say people are together. So there are things that boy can do, that also things that girls can do. So
do you think the book has changed the dynamics of your students? Especially those who were a part of it.
Of course. I have seen it change. For him, he said he cannot pick a spoon from the ground. Kazito, in the first place, he cannot pick a spoon because this is the work of girls.
You're doing that now?
You see?
Things have changed. تعلمت كتير. كده احكي لي شوية تعلمت شنو من الكتاب ده بالذات.
الكتاب ده يعني بالذات في شغل المشاركة، يعني احنا لازم نشارك اشغال مع البنات. ده الحاجة الواحد كان انا ما قاعد نعمله للنهاية. يعني احيانا انا كنت ذات كان قلت لهم انه احنا بقى مرة زي ما نجي من المدرسة لازم القى حاجات كله جاهز، لو ما لقيته جاهز انا بدوق اختي هذا. وملابسي ذاته احيانا قاعد اقول لهم غسلوا بالرجال، كان هو داير ولا ما داير. كان ابغى اغسل ملابسي انا كان قاعد ادقهم طوال يا اخواتي دير السفار منه. يعني ده حاجه كان قلت لهم زي اصلا. لكن بعد ما خلاص قعدونا ونسنا وتكلمنا عن حاجات دي ورونا ذات عن جنده، قال لا حاجات زي ده ما صح، ما ممكن تجبر زور على حاجه هم داير يعملوا يعني نيته، بالذات في اختك البيت. يعني ما ممكن يعني تستعمل موضوع بأنف، ممكن تكلم معه براحة. كانوا قال بغسلوا كانوا أبا ما تدقوا. بس هو قال أنا فعلا زي ما جيت راجعت نفسي قعدت براحة كده، جيت لقيته بأنه شنو ده كلام يعني غلط كثير. يعني أنا أجبر زول في حاجة يعني أعمله، لأنه هو عنده حق. احتمال كانوا ذاته يعني تعبان يوم ده، أنا جيت جبرته هو أبا يلا طوال جيت براد دقيته كده هيكون شنو أنا ظلمته شديد. رغم انه انا كان ما بعرف اصلا ذاته بانه في حاجه حاصل له، لكن انا بس استعملته جوه حقي معه.
انت شايف الكتاب ده ممكن يساعد يغير وجهة النظر بتاع الناس لما نيجي للمرأة والراجل؟
والله وجهة نظر الكتاب ده انا شايفه الا كان نزل قراوه، يعني كان زول قراوه ياما زي ما احنا بنقول هسه في الاذاعه ده ندونس عنه كثير. يلا الناس اللي بسمعوا في باقي ناس بيستفيدوا، في باقي ناس ما بيستفيدوا. يعني في حاجه كثير قاعد الاحظ ذاته احيانا نحن يعني حتى لو سمينا حاجه في ناس يعني ما قاعد يشتغلوا به، يعني بيجهلوا المواضيع بالذات. ده الحاجه اللي لسه لا حسي ما ممكن يعني يغير الناس، يعني تجاهل له ما خلى،
لكن ممكن يساعد بيكون بدايه
بيساعد. ايوه
اوكي.
إضافة سألتني السؤال أنا ما جاوبته. هل للآباء للبارنتس كتاب ده مين عملناه طلعه السنة اللي فات 2020 زمن كورونا. وزمن كورونا ده يا هو تعرف سوشيال ديستانس في حتى المدارس كانت مقفولة. لكن الحمد لله السؤال اللي بيجاوب كتير هو مدام ريبيكا. لكن اننا كنا في النهايه بتاعنا انها بلان افتر كتاب طلعت بنوزع للبارنتس. هنعمل بقول لهم لانشينج داي للكتاب، نادي الامهات اللي يجوا مع اولاد بتاعهم، هنقعد هنسلم اي زول كتاب ويلا يشوفوا قصص هم حكوا بخشمهم في مكتوبه جوا هنا. في قصص شلناها من السلاطين موجوده. في تاني قالوا بعضنا بنفتحوا في سبيكر يسمع قصه كانوا حكاوا زمان لك وشوف غيرناه كيف طلع بطريقه ثانيه كيف شفتها. لكن عشان كان زمن كورونا جاء وحاجات وقفت كتير. لكن بنتمنى ان شاء الله بوجود بتاعكم ادفانس يوز راديو بوجود بتاعكم توك 111 هنعمل حاجه كده صغيره زي احتفال. هنلم كل الاباء وانتم قاعدين حتى الاستوديو الناس اللي جايين هنناقش الكتاب وشوف زول طلع كتاب الناس منه سيمين من الناس منه هو حياكم بخشمهم وهل الكتاب ده نفعهم ولا ما نفعهم ده هنشوف يوم ده الرياكشن ده سوا
ان شاء الله ان شاء الله. Dr. Rebecca, you mentioned a radio drama, so tell me a bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to build on something that Richard was basically.
Please.
Yes, I think he said it, most of it, but the intention of this book was something different at the end, that we were going to actually have a teacher's workshop to kind of like guide teachers through a process of using the stories in the classroom. After every story are creative activities to use in the classroom, and but that didn't happen, as he said, because of COVID and all this. So, and also meet with the parents. We're going to have a launch. So, as he said, hopefully
Inshallah.
that will happen. That will happen. So this is actually the launch of the book today. It's the first time that it's really had a very public, a very public visibility. It really hasn't yet been discussed widely or had a platform.
Yes.
In terms of the radio drama was produced out of the stories. Some of the stories are the same stories that we selected for the book, and there were a couple that were in the radio drama that weren't in the book. And some of the stories that are in the book were chosen for the radio drama but were interpreted differently. There was a different ReStory. So for example, The Father Who Ate His Children, the title story.
Right.
That's a very interesting, complex, layered story of an abusive father, husband who neglects his children and eats. It's a folktale. It's a Kenyan folktale, and he eats the children even as they are just newborns. And so, in order to protect her children, the mother takes them to the side of a river, and the fish and the birds become protectors. Yeah, and so. And even the father tries to even change his voice through a kujor so that he can get into the river, so that he can get the baby from the fish. But then in fact, it works at first, but then he's
the birds come and help.
Yeah, the birds come and get the baby from his hands. In the radio drama, it's a story the story that's told is the father is still abusive and neglectful, but what he does is he sends his children out to the streets to beg for him.
Collect money.
And that's how he's eating them. So eating the children becomes a metaphor. And were you in that?
Yeah.
So you can also speak to that.
Yeah.
But so in the folktale, it's a literal. He's eating the placenta, the babies.
Right.
But in the radio drama, it's become metaphor, and so the father's eating the children by using them and abusing them and using them for begging in the streets. And so this is like also touching on something that happens in Juba in real life.
Yeah. Jackie, I know we've had the book for quite some time, and we both read it. What are your thoughts on the book?
Yeah, the book is very nice, but then some of the stories appear like fictions, if I get it right. Okay, so I loved one of the story, the woman sitting behind her husband, and we also discussed that in the university with some other students. But then earlier you mentioned something to do with peace, because I am also doing like my course is more related to peace. But then how can these kind of narratives contribute to peace building?
Well, I mean, that's on one level. I want to say that when you have a peace, I guess there's sort of a saying, peace begins at home. So if you have domestic violence, that's already that's
injustice,
not peace. Yeah, it's injustice, and it's you know, it's already violating certain kinds of peaceful existence. And so this kind of book, these stories, are teaching people non-violent ways of being interpersonally, and that will then contribute to peace.
Okay.
Potentially on a wider level. The book there's some exercises before the stories begin, like analyzing power, for example. And so we bring the students through these exercises to understand, you know, sort of abusive uses of power, like a father eating his children is coercive, right? It's violent. And how then can you rewrite the story where the father, you know, those kinds of dynamics can change to more peaceful dynamics. So I guess there are many violent behaviors in the book, but also exercises for students to understand how to change those dynamics.
Right. There are numbers of stories in the book, but then you have chosen one, the father who ate our children. Yet there are others. So can you make us maybe understand, please, why is it that you have chosen that particular story to be the topic of the book? The title.
It's the title. Yeah, it's the title. Why that story for the title? That's also a good question. Actually, when we did a presentation, actually it was Richard and Manal, another student who was involved in the process, and Nianachek, and a few and Atem. We did a presentation once for another group, and the title of that presentation was "The Woman Sitting Behind Her Husband and Other Stories." So, for that one, we decided to foreground a sort of more typical story of GBV in a sense, and gender and domestic life.
Violence.
But for the title for the book, I think because we thought that, you know, we had worked with primary school class, and we were looking to have this book be used by schools. We wanted to target students, and the title helps us see that GBV can kind of permeate in a family unit beyond just the woman. It, you know, like the father's abusive tendencies are affecting the whole family unit, and so the children become also victims of this violence. And so also, I mean, I think we also wanted to highlight that men, and we have our Kazito and Richard here, but men play a crucial role in undoing gender-based violence. And so the father and the kind of masculinity the father is performing, or, you know, how he conducts himself, is a really big, important issue for people to discuss in order to unlearn or undo.
Okay, like if I get you right, purposely you did it to address like the concept of patriarchy, maybe something like that.
That's
male dominant in control of the father, the mother, and the kids.
I'm avoiding the word patriarchy, but I'm glad you brought it up. I don't know if I'm avoiding it, but I just sort of didn't. Yeah, but that's wonderful that you brought that up.
Okay,
yeah.
Now I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I have one of the books for those who have joined us online? This is the book. I think we have posted maybe one or two stories last week. So this is the book. This is what it looks like, and we got quite a few people who had thoughts and opinions on the stories that we did post, and one of them was this represents my culture. We heard that so many times, that this exists in my culture. It was very relatable. It was almost real life stories, even though there was use of, you know, animals, and it's almost fantasy, but it was very real for a lot of people. I relate to this. I know this. It exists in my culture, in my community, and so on. So I do want to say to everyone who is online, please go ahead and check out some of the stories that we have posted, and we will be posting more. We will also post a link below, hopefully, to a Likikiri website where you can have access or updates to the book as well. We're still continuing with the conversation, so please keep putting your comments below, and we will come back to them at the end of the show, or we will have Rebecca, Richard, and Kizito log in and respond to any questions that you do have. We are Gender Talk 211 on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And then Likikiri as well on Twitter, Likikiri Collective on Twitter, Facebook, and the website, likikiri.org. Yes. So we are all over online. So continue putting in your messages to us or Likikiri if you have any questions about the father who ate his children. Now I want to know about the drama. I'm really interested in the radio drama and how far you've gone with that already. Is it in are they plays that you also do in universities that you present to audiences, right? Because it's a play, I'm guessing, but it's on it's an audio on radio.
I guess let Kizito and Richard, since they were actively involved in the making of this, they sat as a group. They even you know, they rehearsed all 10 episodes. So there was a decision made that each of the 10 episodes would focus on a different story. So it wasn't like a radio drama where it was a series or a continuous.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Understood.
It was each episode was a different story, self-contained, beginning, middle, end. And then there was a panel, actually. We convened some people at the end of each story to discuss the story. Sometimes it was the giver of the story, like Ajok and Majok. We had the philosophy professor from University of Juba, Madhu Tong, who was remember him? Yeah, he's the one who gave the story when they visited University of Juba for a tea talk. Madhu Tong told that story. Then we took that story for the book and the radio drama, and then he was a panelist at the end of the story to tell about the real story that he experienced when he was a boy.
Yeah.
And then even Chief Jacinto was a panelist, and we had Viola Riak from UNFPA as a panelist, and we had Aluel Nanyok as a panelist. We had many different kinds of panelists. It aired on Radio Mariah for 10 episodes, but I think that we still have the MP3s, and we still hope that it will get more coverage, and maybe they want to talk.
What about distributing the book to, or not necessarily distributing, but teaching some of these stories, some of the concept, let's say, of restoring in schools, and also providing the book as a tool for children and students in general to understand GBV and gender norms and so on, because I think reading it, I felt like I understood it so much as an 11-year-old, as a 16-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old. I understood it. And I think before, at 11-year-old, as an 11-year-old, I didn't have that. I didn't have anything that can explain to me, you know, what gender norms are or what GBV is. I didn't have that. So how about introducing this into schools and help children or students in general understand?
Do you think that's a good idea, Kasim? Introducing it into schools?
That is good.
Richard?
Allah, Leana, it is very important to introduce it. gender-based violence. يعني إذا بدأناه في مجتمع بتاعنا الجنوبيين ديل، أنا جنوبيين نتكلم حقيقة. لأنه عشان نلقى قصص ديل الجنوبيين يحكوا ما جابوا من برا. أنت عارفة لما لقينا القصص ديل يعني كان في صراع، حتى اللي في بقى قصص لقينا في المحاكم منمينا فيه. في ناس اللي بيقولوا لا ما زي ده، كيف يكون يحصل كلام زي ده؟ إذا تكلمنا عن يعني تكلمنا عن حاجة كيف المرأة بيت صغير تشيل توديه لزول كبير. قصة ده في ناس قالوا ده حقي ما بده يتدخل فيه. ندي لغنماية ندي لزول، في النهاية أنا ده حقي، ما يقول لي قرا وين وأنا ما أدري ده أنا ما أدري ده. كلام زي ده ما في. عشان الناس يتغيروا من أفكار بتاع مثلا زي ما قلت قبل ربيع يحاول يقولوا مين دوميني عشان يطلعوا من برا ده ما حاجة سهل، ما بتعللوا بكرة. عشان كده أنا بقول I stress this thing must be taught to children from younghood. لأن عربي بقول العلم في الصغر كالنقش على الحجر. إذا زقيناه نميناه في علم صغير هو بيكون كده متعلم وفاهم وعارف قدام شنو. كان شاف بكرة راجل بيدق في مرة واللي بيعمل بيقول لا ده غلط، لكن إذا أنت قلت بالمجتمع بيت بكفري يمين شمال شوف ده عادي، هاي ده بيت ساكت، ده بينا ساكت ما يفتح اسمه حقه يشيله، ده بيت ساكت اقعد تيجي ما يتكلم. الرجال بيتكلموا في إيرس مرة ما يقعد ما يقول رأيه ذاته، ده مرة ساكت. شفتها ده في هسي حاليا بيحكي في المجتمع بتاعنا. عشان نغير حاجات دي لازم نبدأ من المدارس. بعد 10 سنة 20 سنة قدام عيال ديل هم هيغيروا المجتمع، ما عيال بتاع ما نحن الكبار ديل. انا هنونس في الراديو هنا ليه السنة الجاي يعني بيقول تبعفوا في همبوكا دي ماله مبدود ما هيغير يفتح لا بيجي ماشي بهناك. لكن الصح ده نبدأ من الصغر. So it's very important to teach gender norms to these children in a simplest way. That is the stories.
Yes.
كانت قلت لها حاجة ده قصة ده كده 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 تقول ده فهمت شنو؟ بقول عشان ده عشان كده ده مو كده وكويس البطل قال بطل كده يسطر.
Yeah, because like in the book we talk about the cycle of socialization and how it starts really early on. So you have to begin early.
Okay. Jackie, you had conversations in university on some of the stories in the book. So how did that go?
Yeah. Many of the students actually, because I picked the story which saying the woman sitting behind her husband. So I had 6 students, okay, 3 males and these are grown-up people, okay, and also 3 females. So I deliberately decided not to read this story, but then show them the picture, okay. I needed them to interpret in the picture before getting into the story. Then I asked one of the gentlemen, can somebody assign for me?
And actually that's a good time to say also that the students see all the drawings in the book. Another participation.
Oh, the students drew all the art in the book.
Yeah, even the cover art. Yeah. All the art is by the students.
So I deliberately never read the story yet, and then I asked them, what do you see here? Yeah. Like, how can you observe?
This
what
is
do you
what's on
see?
the page.
What do you see in that picture? Okay, so one of the gentlemen was the first to raise his hand. Then he was saying, I'm seeing 2 people sitting opposite, and the other one appeared like a female, and she's not eating. Did I get that right? I said we'll find out in the story. So I continue with reading the story. Then they really realized that the drawing in fact reflects the story.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but then these things happens in real life because they were also sharing their experiences. Like there was a man already who is married, but then he says he came to realize that female eat chicken when he was 25 years. Since from his childhood, it's being said that female don't eat it. It's not okay for them. Okay, if they are to eat, then the younger one, maybe they can eat the chicken wings or something to do with the head. So they came to realize that, like, in real sense, it's very beneficial for a human health status to eat this kind of food because of the immune system and all this, okay? So you'll find that the story really reflect the real life experiences, and also it makes people recall other events, okay? Others were already practicing it, you know? It's like it's part of them, okay? But then at some point there was a lady also who gave a contribution, like this abuse of, you know, gender violence, like a man dominating the family. Some women to some point take it as part of life. They enjoy it, okay? It's okay, I cook, my husband eat first, and then you enjoy watching. Okay? So it's like what Ustaz just mentioned, like it's already in the mind. So there's a sense of psychological liberation that's really needed, because it's somehow hard to undo, but then we give it time. And then they also gave their own suggestion, okay, that they are seeing this, it's inhuman, but then we cannot stop talking about it. Maybe our generation will benefit.
Yes.
They also brought a concern that this should not only be like for a very short discussion, but then many men should get involved, because others don't know this and they don't feel it's bad to do it because it's nature in them, okay? So it appears something normal. Yeah, it's okay, I'm a husband, I'm in charge. But then they also gave a contribution that the sense of masculinity is destroying them, because a man wants to base his knowledge on the muscles, even things that he cannot do, but by the virtue of the fact that you're a man, so you need to do this. For example, they are not being allowed to cry. In the crowd, it's sign of weaknesses. But then psychologically, like kind of emotion, it's normal for a human being to cry, okay? It relieves you. Okay. They also went on sharing other stories, like he was in the seminary, so the father died, that guy, and because of that nature that he was told men cannot cry, you know. So the father died, he was told that story, he went back home for the funeral, people were crying, even his sisters were crying, he never cried, okay. Not until he returned back to the seminary, it began disturbing him, because that operation now of anger, the pain was deep down. It became coming again, okay? So he's like kind of going crazy, not until they need to give him very special attention, like counseling, something like that. So you see that the story really reflects real life event, but then it need to go like the way we are trying to do it, because it's very hard to come up like in the middle of the night and do everything now. But this kind of education, like talking about it, okay, we can also involve other matured people, because like a learned person is flexible in rationale. They can reason out what's good and then what's bad being explained. And also it's very important, as Mr. Richard says it, like these other children, it's okay to begin, you know, in a very simplest way, depending on their capacities of understanding, so that when they grow, it's very important. But then from the side, because there was a lady who made a contribution that like even women themselves, like, you know, they will be the one like trying to pinpoint you, oh, these spoil university students, okay? So like
contributing to patriarchy.
Yeah, contributing to patriarchy, okay? You are spoiled, like, you know, when you go to school, you get this other knowledge that you want to look at men as inferior. So meaning female in some sense enjoy the sense of being inferior because men appear superior to them, okay? So they take this as part of them, but then it's really, you know, they become vulnerable to the situation unknowingly, because it also gives them limitation. They cannot think beyond woman being only a household or a wife, okay? A woman is beyond like just being a household, like something like that, by the virtue of the fact that naturally there's no like, you know, this kind of gender norms, and it has to do with what you can do best as individual, not as a female or a male. You get it? So you'll find that at some point the nature, like the social construction, has really made some of our people, like deep down, they feel it's okay, we enjoy this because this is our culture. But then culture are man-made. We can still undo those other ones that give us limitation. So in the university, students enjoy it, and they are looking like to get even those other students who contributed, such that they can share experience. I think that's what we can do maybe in this strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think like the woman sitting behind her husband. I mean, the woman in the story, like you said, reflects a kind of attitude that what is happening is okay, and it's only her daughter who questions or doubts, and that's what the university students might identify. They can identify. I mean, that's what's magic about a story, is there's many characters, and you can identify with each of the different characters, and that triggers a discussion then, because we talked about this last time we were here, but sort of stories can allow people to distance themselves just a little bit, so you're not confronting someone directly about what they're doing. You're saying, oh, but the woman in the story does this. What do you think of that? And then that can allow maybe for a freer discussion about that woman's behavior. And also, one last thing I want to bring up about that particular story is that it has that element of bystanders. It teaches about active bystanders, which is people who can stand up for justice and voice something that they see as wrong, and it has activities for the students. Can they, or have they ever spoken up when they've seen something wrong, even in their own household? And it's a difficult thing to do. These are topics that are very sensitive and can really take a long time to unpack.
Absolutely. I do like that the book gives a chance for conversation without triggering an argument. So when you present a story, like you said, someone sees themselves in someone, or they've paid attention to someone more than the other because they've triggered a memory for them, or they relate one way or the other. And now it becomes a sharing session where, okay, this is what it's making me feel, or this is what it reminds me of. And then now you have more of free conversations where we're not arguing and saying rights and no rights, but you're actually understanding the other person, and being able to also understand this perspective and that perspective and that perspective and so on. So I really, really like that about the book, and I think it would do teachers great to teach it in schools where kids can now see themselves and actually tell their own stories, or have an understanding of what it is, and then now reflecting on who they want to actually become moving on in the future. I think it would be extremely and very helpful in that. Before we wrap up for the show, I do want to know, what is the plan for the father who ate his children? Where do we move from here?
Well,
there was a mention of a launch, maybe.
Yeah, we want. So actually, I should say, Likikiri. There's something called the Moleskine Foundation, and they announced a small grant for organizations that had been affected by COVID. It is called the Creativity Pioneers. It was specifically for organizations that use creativity for social change. And we're proud to say that we're one of 10 organizations around the world who won one of these small grants.
Congratulations.
And we won it for this project, the ReStorying South Sudan, because COVID had cut us short. Right. So we'll use that small fund to have a launch of the book, and then we would like to get it in the hands of teachers. We want to have the teachers workshop. We're talking to. We're talking to having it in schools, but we're also talking to maybe a health organization that might want to use it in their sexuality education, things like that. So that's another idea, to have it in sort of community groups. So that's, I think that the rest of 2022 and beyond will be finding a strategy for getting it used.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And then can you please share with the audience your social media accounts. If they want to reach out to you, where do they go? Please share it with them on the live, and then we will also share it at the bottom of this live on Facebook. So
if you want to know more about Likikiri, you can go to our website, www.likikiri.org, and you can go to our Instagram at Likikiri and our Twitter at Likikiri. And our email is likikiri@gmail.com for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Richard Kizito. I'm really happy that you came on and shared so much with us, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to see you more and more in the future, especially with radio drama. Yes. Jackie?
I am just happy with Dr. Rebecca and the team, because I'm feeling like I'm in a team now, because like what Kizito was saying is moving. So I hope that many of us outside listening, be parents or even this young one, can help to translate so that we have a very cohesive society. Thanks everyone else, and thanks to our listeners.
Thank you so much to our audience who listened in. My name is Eva Lopa. With me is Jackie Ben, and we will see you next Thursday, same time, same place. Gender Talk 211. We are out.